Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 99 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. The great photographer Robert Frank said, "It is always an instantaneous reaction to oneself that produces the photograph." It is always an instantaneous reaction to oneself that produces the photograph. What a great statement. A great statement that I read in an equally interesting and wonderful article written by Gretchen Garner. Gretchen Garner, a longtime photo educator, writer, photographer who has been at it for a long time. This is an article that appeared in the New Art Examiner in October 1976 called The Photographic Gesture. And I'll link out to Gretchen Garner's essay, which is available from her website, gretchengarner.com, and I'll link to her website and to this great essay. And in this essay, which is it's interesting to read in our digital age because it was written in 1976, long before the digital age approached, and so she makes some suppositions about photographic practice in terms of technology that no longer exactly hold true, or at least no longer hold true exclusively. But I do find something really interesting in this article, in addition to this quotation she uses from Robert Frank. And she says in the sort of introductory paragraphs of this essay, "The gesture of photography is different from the gestures of other visual arts. I hope to show that photography is no less complex, difficult, and visual. Indeed, my belief is that in many ways, fine photography is more purely intellectual, purely visual, because the gestures involved are less connected to hand gestures, but much more connected to intense observation, to harder seeing." Harder seeing. Wow, what a great statement about the way in which photography impacts the world, the way we sort of approach the idea of photography through seeing intensely, through seeing and thinking about seeing in that way. That the camera's gesture, she goes on to say, is so important. The way in which we point the camera, the way in which we think about subject is very different from the other arts, the other visual arts, in terms of how it is that photographers think through their subjects. And she goes on in the essay to sort of divide up photography between the production end of things, the harder seeing part of seeing things in the world and placing oneself in proximity to subject. But she also goes and talks about post-production and the way in which photographers work. In her 1976 essay, she talks about the darkroom rather exclusively, but the way in which we work with images after the images are made and how kind of bringing an image to full realization makes all the difference in the world, and that photographers, she feels, often split themselves into two camps. And of course, I think really great photographers may oftentimes do both. They both look at the world with that idea of harder seeing, but then I think they look at their response to the image that ends up being captured on film or on a digital sensor now with that same sort of hard look, that hard intensity of seeing, and the way in which we use our tools, the way in which we use our craft to recreate not just the way the thing looked, but also the way the thing felt to us as the image maker. So this idea of photographic gesture, and I ran across this essay just because I was, looking around on the internet at different essays about photography, and I found this terrific essay by Gretchen Garner on her website. The ideas that she brings to the practice, the craft of making images. And, one of the other bits that she talks about here in this essay is she quotes Edward Weston and says that Weston said photography was, quote, "a perfect medium for one whose mind is teeming with ideas, imagery, for a prolific worker who would be slowed down by painting or sculpting, for one who sees quickly and acts decisively and accurately." And I think that you probably would go along with my thought that sometimes I react decisively. Sometimes I react with that accurate, decisive, quick vision. But oftentimes it takes that sort of really intense gaze, And I suppose that differentiates the work that I do from the work that other people do with photography that is more of the moment, of more of that Henri Cartier-Bresson decisive moment. Street photographers, for example, an art form which I've long admired but never have felt that I've been particularly successful at, perhaps because I've never really practiced it as much as I've practiced the other more sort of contemplative way of making photographs. And I think that one of the essay pieces sort of suggests that that is in fact the case, that it is about that practice, about that doing of things and the way in which we do photography in that sort of way that we might practice anything else that we're trying to learn, continuing to do it, continuing to practice and hone that vision, hone that craft of how we see. Another thing that Garner says in this essay is she talks about the idea that the eyes and the mind are the primary tools of photography. Well, that's so great. In this day and age where we're constantly being bombarded by new Nikons and new Canons and Litro cameras and all these other things that we hear about on a daily basis, the idea that the primary tools of photography are the eyes and the mind. The eyes and the mind, the thing that we engage the world with and the way in which we contemplate the world that we engage, the way we think about what it is that we see and how we can respond to it, and what it is that we're doing with the things that we see. So I would encourage you to just think about these ideas in this great essay. And of course, while you're on Gretchen Garner's website, take a look at her terrific work made over a long period of time. And again, a tremendous example of the various bodies of work that someone can produce when motivated to continue working. Thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode, the 100th episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.